feed. If you hear me, but I'm back here and we will be in the feed soon. It looks like we're having a little bit of difficulty with Rumble, I'm afraid, too. But we will be broadcasting here on YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else as soon as we get that image down. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me behind there. We just got a little bit of a different layout today, and there's going to be a couple of technical challenges. We will resolve right away, I am confident. So if you're looking at that image there, I'm sure. Aha, there we go. I think you guys see me. Excellent. Thank you for your patience. Mondays, aren't they something else? I mean, kick the week off well. At least we've got our technical headaches out of the way on day one. I'm sure the rest of the show and the rest of the week is going to go just swimmingly. I should get the comments about what kind of dork uses the term swimmingly, right? Well, I am the kind of dork that does that. It's July 25th, 2022. As I said, it's a Monday, and I'm Cory Morgan. This is Western Standard's daily live show called Triggered because I get my blood pressure up, I get triggered, I say things, I trigger other people, and I get all sorts of crabby responses in email. Make sure to use that comment section over there, guys, and share your feedback and thoughts with what's going on here. Just make sure to keep it somewhat civil. We can get mad. We can question each other. You can question me. You can send questions towards my guests, but we do want to keep it on somewhat of an even keel. So good to see you all checking in from all over the place out there, from BC and I'm sure East Coast and all the rest of the areas. So today I got a couple of guests on, and of course, as usual, Dan McTeague. People might know him. He's the head of Canadians for Affordable Energy, a very good voice. He's always spoken on things like gas prices, energy costs in general, and he speaks in defense of the energy industry quite often, but he calls a spade when they seem to be hooping us. And, you know, we had some interesting stuff going on. I mean, I'm supportive of the private market. I want to see prices reflecting what are real, but it just did seem a little odd within Alberta. You know, the prices sure go up a heck of a lot faster at the pump than they go down when the world prices go there. So maybe Mr. McTeague can break some of that down. Then the Western Standard's Parliamentary Bureau Chief Matthew Horwood is going to come on, and we're going to talk because he was covering the protests last weekend out there in Ottawa. Canadians were up, pushing back, and upset with, well, I guess standing up for the Dutch farmers out there and things like that. And I think it's a bit of a crossover of protesters from all sorts of other things they're upset with too. These things kind of turn into a generic protest at times. So yeah, I'm going to get my rant going, guys, and get it on. And listening to the radio this morning and hearing the language, and then getting into the newsroom and watching on the TV. Yes, the Pope's visiting, and he's apologizing for residential schools and things. But we got to correct some stuff, guys. This language is beyond the pale. So it's about some time somebody came out and said it, because the language being used by activists and fed by the legacy media is getting to be too much. So let me say it loud and clear. There was no genocide, and not everybody who ever attended a residential school was abused, nor should they all be labeled as survivors. Let's look at the definition of genocide. It's the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. This never happened in Canada. I don't know how many times I got to say it, because you hear it on the news over and over again, and it's going uncorrected. There is actually a list of recorded established genocides in the world. It's unfortunate. It's long and horrible. It's got nearly 40 entries. Humans have a long history of trying to exterminate groups among themselves. The list begins with the Holocaust, of course, with a death toll of 6 million, to a Tasmanian war at the bottom where 600 to 900 Aboriginals were killed in the 1820s. Canada was not on the list anywhere because, let me say it again, there has never been a genocide in Canada. And listening to the coverage of the Pope's visit to Alberta, it's hard to make it a minute without, though, hearing the word genocide used. This has to stop. It's wrong, and it's perpetuating a horrible myth. I listened to a person on the news this morning referred to as a survivor because she'd attended a day school on a reserve. She's not a survivor any more than the rest of us who attended public schools as children. Survivor is a loaded term. It implies there were efforts to kill somebody, and this didn't happen. It's not to say there haven't been abuses committed within schools, whether day schools or residential. We know there have. Let's quit pretending that every child who ever attended school is immediately to be considered a survivor, though, or of attempted genocide. I mean, because that narrative is being pushed right now, and it has to be corrected. There's a culture of perpetual victims being built here, and it's having the exact opposite effect of reconciliation. Compensation and apologies for residential schools is now being offered to the descendants of the former students because the damage is now being considered intergenerational. This is a cash cow for class action suits, and the lawyers are doing very well, and some activists, they're getting very rich, and they want to keep this happening for generations. Let's quit pretending that it isn't the money inspiring those activists and lawyers right now. The Pope's going to be offering apologies today. Some will say they're welcome, but they're also going to say it's not enough. It's never enough. The compensation is never adequate. The Catholic Church has a long history of wrongdoings, from actions during the Crusades to abuses against children, Indigenous and non, by priests in the last few decades. They took no part in some sort of Canadian genocide, however. It's wrong to deny there was wrongdoing against Natives in Canada. No, absolutely. The government, churches, even private citizens did terrible things in the last century, and some to our First Nations. It's also wrong, though, to create a myth of genocide and universal abuse. If one watches the news today, you would think that every Indigenous person in Canada attended a residential school and that every one of them were abused. If one, over the course of a century when those schools were going, 150,000 children attended residential schools. That's it. Over 100 years. And not too many of them are alive today. Not because of genocide. It's because it happened a long, long time ago. A few thousand children are known to have perished in those schools during that period. And this isn't to be dismissed, but we have to look at it in the right lens. In the early part of the 20th century, tuberculosis, polio, and the Spanish flu killed children across North America. Native children were no exception. And those schools, they were overrepresented by the deaths, and this is worth looking at. The schools are often underfunded, the children were malnourished at times, and yes, there were some abuses by predatory criminals who found their way into positions of power in those schools. Those things have been more than addressed now, though, and reparations have been made to the people directly affected. If there's more, then let's dig up some graves and find the evidence, but they won't do that. Canada was turned upside down over some anomalies found with a ground-penetrating radar unit in Kamloops last year. And again, terms like mass murder and genocide were used by activists and media alike. They need to be corrected. To date, not a single grave has been identified, though the term mass graves is still being used. Do we really want truth and reconciliation? Well, we have to begin with truth. The truth is there was no genocide in Canada. Let's start there, because reconciliation isn't going to happen until there's truth. The truth is, again, not every Indigenous person who set foot in a school is a victim of something. Let's start there. Perpetuating falsehoods and trying to create an entire culture of victimhood is serving everybody poorly, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. So let's start correcting the record and saying things like they are, guys, because this exaggeration and everything isn't serving anyone well. All right, that's what's got me going, kicking off the week. Let's check in with our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what's happening in the rest of the world. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's okay, Cory. That was a good Monday morning rant.
I had to get that out. Coverage is just too painful to behold.
It is. It's very painful. Hey, I hear you had some other flying creatures to deal with this weekend, not the bees.
No, I found a nest of yellow jackets. So yeah, I crossed my efforts. I'm trying so hard to manage to keep these bees alive since I started beekeeping. And then I was trimming some branches and one fell down and I discovered a large nest of yellow jackets next to my garage. I didn't get stung. And I destroyed them with pleasure. I sprayed them and tore apart their nest. And I don't care what anybody says. They're evil, nasty bugs, and they were going to harm my bees. And I feel no regrets.
Good for you. Make no apologies, Cory. But apologies the Pope did. Mere minutes ago, he said he was deeply sorry for the Catholic Church's role in the aforementioned residential school situation. He was in the central Alberta area of Maquis and made the apology in front of the Prime Minister and the Governor General. So as I mentioned, that's just happened. Our Arthur Green is busily bashing out the story as we speak. It was a horrible weekend of violence in British Columbia this weekend, Cory. And it ended this morning with a guy in Langley apparently losing his mind and going out and shooting homeless people. The RCMP will not confirm the number of victims, but they do say there are several people dead. And the gunman is in custody. And that sparked an emergency alert about 6 a.m. this morning, Cory, on BC cell phones, telling people in Langley about this and that they had better take cover. So we've got an initial story up, and our Reed Small out in Vancouver is working on that. He's also working on the brutal assassinations of a couple of known, or at least one known gang member in broad daylight in Whistler Village yesterday. These two were getting out of their vehicle and were gunned down. So the cops are investigating that one. They were able to arrest 2 people near Squamish after a vehicle was set on fire. And then they're still hunting for a man who killed 2 women in Chilliwack last week. His getaway vehicle was found in Bridal Falls, which is about 20 kilometers east of Chilliwack. And but they've searched the area, and as of now, they have not come up with a suspect. Other stuff that's already up on the website: the sex habits of the world's most interesting man keep coming up. Elon Musk has denied he had an affair with the wife of the person who founded Google with him. Says he's too busy to have sex, in fact, just despite the fact many of his conquests are spitting out children on a regular basis the last month or so. And lots of good stuff on the site, lots of breaking news. So that'll all be coming up this afternoon, Cory.
Right on. Well, always busy in the newsroom. I'll let you get back to coming up with more of that good stuff for us, Dave. And, we got to find out what's going on with Musk and his wayward pecker.
Yes, the New York Post had a great headline today on front page. They said, muskrat.
Yeah, some of the stuff makes it easy for us. All right, thanks, Dave. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
That is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And yes, as we see with the check-in, we cover a lot of things, from some of the kind of lighter, fun things. Perhaps it's not fun for those personally tied to Elon Musk, but it's kind of a soap opera. And as he says, he's a very interesting man. If nothing else, like him, hate him, he is fascinating. There's no getting around that. He disrupts this world and things. So this is where I like to remind everybody, though. I mean, again, we got reporters. I'll be talking to Matthew from Ottawa. I've talked to Reed out in BC. We got Melanie here in Calgary. People all over the place. Arthur's working up in Edmonton. The reason we've got all that is because you guys have been subscribing. This is how we pay our bills. We don't take any tax dollars, and we won't. But we rely on you guys, and thousands have subscribed, and we really appreciate it. If you haven't already, get on there, guys. westernstandard.news/membership. It's $10 a month, $99 for a year. Well worth it. We appreciate, again, those who have subscribed. And if you haven't, it's a service. We just asking you to pay for a service, and it's not much. It's less than some people pay to subscribe to video games. All right, let's see. We'll talk about a bit more stuff from the comment scroll. I see Tammy McLean saying, what you need to do is quit downplaying residential schools. I'm not, Tammy. I'm not. That's what I mean. This is some of the language. You're not allowed to critique anything unless you're saying you're denying it happened. No, I'm not denying it happened. I want us to be truthful about what really happened, though. Nobody's saying they were nice or good, or a good idea, or there wasn't a need for some reconciliation. But what I'm tired of now is the bullshit. There was no genocide. Now, for me to say there was no genocide isn't downplaying what happened at the residential schools. It's saying there's no genocide. It's a simple sentence. It's just like if somebody was beaten terribly right in front of me, and I point out the person wasn't murdered, it's not downplaying the fact that the person was beaten. It's just pointing out the fact the person wasn't murdered. We need clarity on what's really happened. And we aren't getting that. We're getting exaggeration. We're getting words like mass graves when there are no mass graves. We're getting words like genocide when there was no genocide. We're applying the term survivor to everybody. Everybody. As I said, a young woman on the media who obviously never attended a residential school. That was clear. She attended a day school. In other words, she attended a school on a reserve. And the media refers to her as a survivor. Well, then fine, we're all survivors. Every morning you get up and you're still breathing, your heart's still ticking, you survive the night. And what it does do is undercut those who really did suffer abuse in the schools, because some did. And let's get to those and find who they were if we can, charge who's responsible if they're still alive. But there's not many, because most of this happened 100 years ago. But we just keep going on and on and on. We're dragging this issue on forever. It's not good for the people who went to those schools. It's not good for up-and-coming generations when they listen to those loaded words, when they listen to these exaggerations, and they believe that this really happened. They believe there was a systematic effort to eradicate First Nations people. There was not. Hell, even if you want to look it up, the smallpox-infected blankets, because people like throwing that one at me all the time. It's a myth. It's a myth. It's a well-documented myth. Let's stick to the facts. And when you stick to the facts, it's not saying we're downplaying anything. It's not saying that everything went well or was proper. It's just getting to the truth. And we have to have critical discussion to do that. And yeah, I'm watching just the ongoing apologies. And you know what? It's never enough. At some point, you have to actually say it's behind you. It's not to say it didn't happen. But we're not even letting that wound heal because we keep tearing it open and then exaggerating. If anything, we're widening it. And it's wrong. And I'm going to keep being critical on this because we're doing a disservice to this country by pretending there were mass graves, pretending there was genocide, and just into this ongoing issue that just seems to have no end. And it's not doing any favors. You know, it's one of the commenters. Where are we? Somebody was saying, you know, the Catholic Church is no bloody good. Hey, I'm no big fan of the Catholic Church. Don't worry. I'm not here to apologize for them. And I said that in my opening too. They've done a lot of bad things historically, and not too long ago in some cases. They did cover-ups for some of their pedophile priests, and we're talking in the last 20 years and stuff. But I only want them nailed for the stuff they really did. And, you know, people don't understand as well, again, and I've talked to guests about that, like what these schools were about. And why were the churches always in them? United Church, Catholic Church, all of those churches who took part. Because back in those days, that's how social services happened. We didn't have the big bloated government that took care of everything back then. I remember in Banff when I was a kid where I grew up, it was still nuns at the Mineral Springs Hospital in town. Because those hospitals and everything began with religious people managing them. They were semi-charities. And back then, if you were looking for some sort of institution to take care of orphans, Indigenous or non, it typically was churches. You know, sanatoriums, all sorts of things. Again, churches, did they always run them well? No. Did they always run them humanely? No, we know that. But that's why there was so much church involvement back then. And so we just, you know, it's funny, like I said, they call it a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, yet we seem to hide from the truth when it comes to discussion of it. And I mean, they're hard truths, but I'm sick of the exaggerations. Why is the legacy media not correcting it? Instead, they say it. They're saying it too. Genocide. Where? It's not by any definition. It's not registered as a genocide, so stop using it. Some people say it was cultural genocide. Well, I don't know. There were some efforts in some schools. Absolutely, some kids got punished for speaking their own language. There were some people with that full intent to wipe out the cultural identity. I don't deny that. Was it a full-out mandate? Was that the goal? I doubt it. Because the culture still seems to be hanging in there, guys. And it took pressures. But a genocide again? No, it was not. So let's have that discussion. Let's get there. I would love to see this actually resolved. Let's get it behind us. Jet Corgan saying we need the diaries and records of priests and nuns at residential schools. Yeah, well, those might be hard to get. You know, we can't get real flies on the wall. We have to rely on the records we got. Some of which, and I've talked about that on before, you know, is the archaeological records then. I mean, the big thing that's really set that off, the reason that literally I'm looking out the studio window here and seeing the TV and this ongoing ceremony out by Hobima with the Pope there apologizing and meeting with First Nations people, it was all set alight by the Kamloops school discoveries. And still to this day, they haven't excavated a single anomaly that the GPS found, haven't found a single body. Maybe there are 200 bodies down there. By the way, it's not even 215. They've already corrected that down. 200 potential bodies. That's all even, you know, the most an expert, if you want to call it that, was say about this yet. It's been 14 months. When are we going to follow up? When are we going to try and find out what happened there? Instead, we allow people to get away with terms like mass graves. What mass grave? We don't even know if there's a single grave there yet. And if we do find graves, what were they? Were they settlers? Were they children? Were they grown people from the school? People have this myth that there's a bunch of missing children. They aren't missing, guys. They aren't missing. They were documented. Again, doesn't mean they weren't abused. Doesn't mean some children didn't die in those schools, but there was a record of it. And yes, as others are saying, you know, Johnson 66, why no exhumation? Jet Gorgon, potential is not actual. That's right. So we need to get in there. I mean, if this really was criminal, then let's get a forensic investigation, shouldn't we? If it was anything else, it would have been. You know, as I had said in a past rant, if this had been bodies in my yard, I wouldn't even have had a choice. The police would have taped it off and moved in, started digging, and find out why these bodies were there, how they died. And we aren't doing that with this. 14 months later, then all I can assume is there's no crime. So again, immediately when I talk about these things, as I said, I get comments saying you're trying to understate what happened. No, I just want the truth. And there's a lot of people with a very strongly vested interest in keeping that truth hidden or exaggerating what happened. I think a lot of, what's going on, and a lot of the reason those bodies haven't been dug up, and I'm not saying with all of them, but with some of the cases, there's a lot of people don't want it because they do fear there won't be anything found. And they're doing too well in having the mystery. All right, well, let's get ready for our next guest, and that's Mr. Dan McTeague. It's been a while since I've had him on. I like always introing because I'm so hard on the Liberals, but we do have to show the difference. There's the Trudeau Liberals, and there was the days when the Liberals were of a more respectable cut, I would like to say. And Dan's of the older gang there. How you doing, Dan?
Feeling old today, Cory. But you know what? With these high prices, it's all coming back into vogue, especially when you consider the national debt and the fact that in one fell swoop, our good friends at the Governor, the Bank of Canada, just added or removed $13 billion from the federal government's ability to finance next year's social programs. So I guess being old Liberal is coming back in style big time.
Well, in some ways. And again, liberal is not all a dirty word. I consider myself a classical liberal. We just have to retake the term. But we are seeing a lot of history repeating itself. Things really look a heck of a lot like they did in the 80s to a degree, the early 80s. We don't have double-digit interest yet, but the inflation, the high energy prices, the government taking on a large amount of debt, it's not like we haven't been on this roller coaster before.
No, and we saw how hard it was to tackle what happened in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. The excesses had to eventually come to some settlement, and that settlement was very painful. And I was part of a government that had certainly said to provincial governments, we're going to impose on you, we're going to download, and we're going to cut back services. And I fully remember Jean-Claude St. Caucus one day. A particular organization had been pushed by our women's caucus. I think the name of the group at the time was the National Action Committee on the Status of Women, NACSAW. Interesting name. And they were harping and complaining that there was no money for the organization. They were upset that they were being cut back. And Chrétien quickly responded by saying, "There's no money. The cupboards are bare. More importantly, if your organization is that significant, that important, go fund yourselves." I think we're getting very quickly to that point where Canadians are going to have to start to realize that after 25 or 30 years of very good times, a generation which has taken it for granted, now comes the piper, and it's time for he or she to be paid. And I think that's going to be very, very difficult times for Canadians ahead. And we're only at the beginning of what could be a significant downturn in our economic outlook.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. And it's again, there was that period of austerity in the 90s that followed the 80s. And that's when every government, even Romano with an NDP or Chrétien with the Liberals or Klein here in Alberta, everybody had to balance their books. There was just no choice in the matter anymore. As you said, you had to pay the piper.
You did, but we had one advantage that we're completely disregarding today. In the 1990s, Jean-Claude St. Paul Martin were able to balance the budget, not just on provincial and on goodwill, which was important. We also had this little thing called the oil and gas sector, which continued to drive more product to the United States, build pipelines. We actually saw some significant reversals in our fortunes because this country basically said yes to oil and gas. Let's sell as much as we can in the United States. The Americans needed it. They were on this kick of energy independence. They seem to have lost their way of late as well, but I think they may very well be reconnected with that soon, given what's happened in Europe. But here's the situation: is that we were able to tackle the significant debt this country had because the revenues were going through the roof. People had jobs. Interest rates then began to fall. People suddenly had change in their pocket they didn't have before and had the ability to do other things. It was a miraculous recovery, and it couldn't have happened if Canada had done what it did today. And that's basically, to use my grandfather's expression, drop the drawers and crap on the very important oil and gas sector, the very golden goose that maintains your standard of living in this country.
Well, yeah, and circling back to what is your specialty, and that's affordable energy, and you've always been, putting out a lot of information on whether it's heating gas and fuel or to gasoline. Something that's been interesting, and I said earlier at the start of the show, you speak to it bluntly on all ends. The free market failed, it sounds like, a little bit in Alberta, for example, and you called them out for that. Like our retail prices weren't following the wholesale prices, and some people were getting it. Normally, I like to stand up for energy providers, whether it's retail or exploration. But in this case, something didn't go right, and it led to a lot of bad public goodwill, I think.
Cory, look, I've been following this for 1994 is when I began benchmarking. And don't take my word for it. This is just what I do manually every single day. You can see this is the December to 2018. I got 5 other books back here. I'm not going to do this to bore or impress your folks. I got 15 of these books going back to 1994, 1995. And in them, you'll see the wholesale price for gasoline. You'll see what the markets did for every major city across Canada. There's an example of this would be back in September of 2019. So I can pretty much get a good idea of where the prices are going to be going, who's making what. I can tell when a refiner is making a killing, and I can tell when governments are making a killing. I can tell the effect of what's going to happen 2 or 3 days. Over the past month, gas stations, not just in Alberta, but also Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the interior central BC have been basically fleecing the public. They have seen their wholesale price drop dramatically. Now, you can explain a few days where, they have old inventory of gasoline that is, they still got to get through, cost them more to sell it. You can get that for a week, maybe 10 days. But a month and a half? No, you're taking advantage of the public. And when I see $1.79 in Edmonton or $1.81 in Calgary, and I know that it's costing them $1.36, $1.38 to buy their fuel taxes in, that is unacceptable. And I'm pleased to see that the premier of the province jumped in. I'd like to hear from Manitoba, BC, and of course, Saskatchewan's premier, because I think it's the same problem. We all want the free market to work. But when you pull this kind of a stunt, you're basically inviting those on the far left to come in and say, let's regulate gas prices. We do that in the Maritimes, and they're being fleeced like you wouldn't believe. They don't get the advantage of the rest of the country. And the last thing we want is have bureaucrats decide for people what fair prices ought to be. Competition should bring the best prices that are there. Retail margins in Alberta should be no more than 15 cents a litre, and I'm being very generous. That's to cover the cost of credit cards, price of electricity to turn on the pumps, running their operation, paying for their taxes, and doing quite well, a good return on investment. But 40 cents, you're pushing the envelope. And I think it's time for them to stop.
And that was unfortunate, as you said, because it does invite the people who oppose the free market. I mean, it gives them that thing to say, look, it fails. This is why we have to intervene. And as you pointed out, that tends to work out much more poorly for us in the end. But as I said, I appreciate you call it out when they do it then, so they don't get away with it. And hey, guys, come on, keep it together. We don't begrudge profit. We just want it within reason. I mean, there is competition, but there is only so many retail gas providers. So it's difficult to really get a widespread. And there's, we can't call it price fixing, but they're so competitive. If one raises it or lowers it, then one down the street's going to follow. So
yeah, it worries me that one has market power, or maybe a couple. But I think the 4 players in our provinces, the Parklands, whoever's running Imperial Oil, I think it's Parkland does a lot of that for them now because they've sold off a lot of their gas stations. Shell, Suncor, and maybe to a lesser extent, Cenovus, Husky ought to be taking this very seriously because there's no other way to reflect this. The numbers are very transparent, not just because I do it. If you look at Petrocan daily rack price and you look at Shell terminal rack price, the wholesale prices are right there. Now, I'll give them the 2 cent or 3 cent for a discount, which means they're making even more money. But the numbers are pretty simple to come by. And so on that basis, Cory, I think this is not the time to be taking advantage of people. You can understand 10, 15, maybe 18 cents a liter or holding back, a little bit because you're worried the prices may spike at some point, which they could and will likely do again. But that is no excuse to take advantage of somebody who, if I'm filling up my, my Ford Escape with 60 liters, it's 55 liter tank, I should say, and it's costing me an extra 20. You're dinging me for 11 or 12 bucks every time I do this a week. That's that's 60, 50 bucks a month. For a lot of families, that's the difference between putting extras on the table and filling up to get to work.
Yeah, well, and I'd like to, it's a tougher area, and it probably wouldn't have enough time to fully fill it. But is there a way we could facilitate more competition on the retail level? I don't want to see another Petro-Canada.
No, neither do I. Here's what's interesting in all this, and in one way, I'm happy. I set out to say, look, I'll call whoever is offline here, offside, whether it be a refiner, whether it be the government increasing taxes, which it has. And I oppose them strenuously, publicly, vociferously, with every ounce of experience and energy that I have. I think it's important that we reveal these things, and working through the press like yourself, Cory, goes a long way at reflecting the problem. I think sooner or later they'll come to the realization, guys, we're caught. We got to drop these things. Going through a whole thing with the Competition Bureau may sound great, but it's I worked on the dual track approach. One's criminal, one's civil. You can get arrest the problem in the civil side, basically by saying, okay, guys, you're caught, smarten up. But that takes months. The damage may already be done by that point. So I think they're openly sharing the data, which I have, I think is important, and letting people know there's a problem. I think 2 weeks ago, no one would have given this any thought. And I was pulling my hair out saying to people, you're being ripped off. And I sent several tweets, warnings to gas stations. Listen, don't abuse your privilege. So I think we're getting to that point now where we don't need, other than shaming and opening up the numbers transparently. I think that's 90% of the battle right there.
Yeah, well, and hopefully, I think the ideal way would be some operator or operators say, you know what, I'm going to take a swipe at my competitor down the road and drop my prices by 10 cents, and the people start flooding there, and it just forces the issue to a proper
UFA in both Edmonton, Calgary. If you have a UFA station, patronize them 24/7. Don't stop going there, and don't go to where you did before. If the difference is 30 cents a liter, it's a good reason for it. They're not taking advantage of consumers the way other gas stations are.
So getting in the last few minutes here to the broader issue, though, I mean, that's the retail thing. We've got the big thing going on. We still have a government that's very ideologically opposed to, as you said, developing this asset. I mean, we're in economic trouble. We have high world energy prices. If anything, we should be very well placed as Canadians to weather this storm. We should be rushing to develop, but they don't sound much different than they did 3 years ago.
The United States Department of Energy Information Agency just released something. And I tweeted it. They said that the United States is now the largest exporter of LNG in the world. They've catapulted ahead of Qatar. They've catapulted ahead of the United Arab Emirates, Australia, and Russia. It's got to tell you something that a country like ours that had 17 projects on the books in the past 10 years lost 16 of 17, and the last one is being vigorously opposed by terrorists. I don't know if the Liberals really understand what they've done here, but by not being able to step up to the plate and get these things built, now when we do recognize that natural gas is the transition fuel, there is no debate on this anymore. It's over. The fact that we hummed and hawed, that the federal Trudeau government, I don't call them Liberals, aided and abetted the organizations which fought this thing and discouraged investment, is nothing short of a scandal. And it's a scandal because you and I are going to be paying for it in terms of high interest rates. And by the way, Cory, on this very important point, the governor of the Bank of Canada a week and a half ago came out and said, I don't understand why the Canadian dollar is not responding to the therapy. We have $100 oil. I've raised interest rates and it's still 130 pennies to buy a US dollar. Because of the green policies advocated by the Trudeau government and its colleagues in the NDP and other allies across the country, we are now paying a significant loss of our purchase power, which turns out to be inflation, which the bank governor is prepared to address by even higher rates. So, for my friends and colleagues who live here in Toronto and neighbors who are wondering how come the interest rates have gone up 2 or 3%, they're going to go up another 3 or 4% by the time we get to where we need to be. You have to ask the question, why are Canadians so blissfully ignorant to a government that has gone out of its way to vandalize our infrastructure, our assets, and our future? This country cannot afford to survive without its ability to get its resources to market. A world that wants our resources more than any other country, and yet we sit here and navel gaze and bend over backwards for every Tom, Dick, and Harry organization, charities, which of course should be bloody well audited because they are not charities anymore, so that they are not continuing to obstruct and destroy the future of my country, of my children's country, and their children's country. And I'm not making a political statement here. I think it's reality. Every Canadian who can't see this probably needs a bucket of cold water dropped on their head right now, because if they don't see it, they'll certainly see it come up when the bailiff comes to their door to repossess their home.
Yeah, as you said, that bucket of cold water is coming, and the economic illiteracy, unfortunately, I mean, you wouldn't expect to see it from the head of the Bank of Canada like that,
Yeah.
or again from our prime ministers who said outright, "I appreciate his candor," saying, "I don't think much on economic policy." Well, it shows, and we're all going to pay a price. But I mean, well, I guess we can just keep, bringing it to light as much as we can and sharing the information and hope to mitigate things and with a reality check sooner rather than later. So I appreciate the work you do on that and for coming on to talk about it with us today. It's, as I said, it's been a while. It's always good getting you on. Where can people keep track of you? And, I know you've got that very classic Excel sheet going on there, but I know you have a digital presence out there as well.
I do have it on computer, but I don't trust them because this stuff, unless it's you throw water on it, there's no way it's gonna disappear.
Yeah.
Affordableenergy.ca is the site. You can get a hold of me, president at affordableenergy.ca. Gaswizard.ca is another one. I do that little gas prediction site there. There's the ability to get on there. Of course, that's a number of ways to get a hold of me, often on Twitter as well. If you're going to come out with a bit of a fight, get ready for one. I don't suffer fools well. I'm not in politics anymore. I don't have to take your guff.
I understand and I appreciate it. All right. Well, thanks again. Good talking to you, and keep up the good work.
Thanks again, Cory. Looking forward to more. Cheers.
That is Dan McTeague of Canadians for Affordable Energy, or as you also said, Gas Price Wizard. And yeah, he's a fun guy to watch on Twitter. He doesn't pull any punches, and we need that. And as I said, what was appreciated was he calls out the energy companies when they're screwing you too. So I mean, because people accuse guys like him, oh, you're just a shill for the oil companies or this and that. Well, no, when the companies, the refiners, the retailers are screwing us, then Dan's going to speak up there too. He is independent, and that's important, and it's good to see. All right, let's see. I'm going to pivot back a bit just to get to some comments, and maybe we can talk a bit more about what's going on with energy. But I saw one that came up just before I started that. See, this is getting to the point of what I was going on with my earlier rant, when we talk about residential schools. So here's a commenter about 15 minutes ago. Magical Mind Transformation says, no genocide in Canada. I guess you didn't learn about the government gave blankets to tribes in Canada with smallpox. It killed thousands of natives. Bullshit. I said that earlier too, because it's not true. It's a myth. It's an urban legend. It's not true. Just because it's still going around doesn't mean it's true. That didn't happen. Look it up, guys. That one's easy to find. But that's what I mean. You're playing whack-a-mole with the baloney that goes around there. I mean, if those things really happened, that would be terrifying, but it didn't happen. Smallpox killed thousands of natives. Absolutely it did. But not purposely on the part of the state. And this blanket thing was a load of crap. There's been scientists who've already pointed out too, even if you wanted to, it's not like you can put it into a blanket and it'll keep for months at a time to spread all over the prairies, guys. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't incubate like that. Back then, they didn't even have, they understood infectious diseases, but they didn't know what germs were at, really. But I mean, this is the mythology we got to fight. This is what we've got to talk about. Let's talk about the real injustices that were done, and there were many, but quit allowing the false ones to dominate the narrative. Taylor Murray saying mass graves are a pit with multiple bodies. Yeah, we don't have any. We don't. A lot of these cemeteries, I mean, the one with Trudeau where he was kneeling there for his photo op with a teddy bear, that was a known Catholic cemetery. It wasn't some hidden graveyard. And I watched the earlier part with the Pope today, and he went and did a quick prayer and service in a very large cemetery there. Yes, because it's the town cemetery, and it's been there for hundreds of years. And if you look around it, there's hundreds and hundreds of wooden crosses. And you know what? Those crosses are not going to be there in 80 years from now. Wood doesn't keep that well. It's just the tradition that it is typically on First Nation burial areas. So they weren't hidden, they weren't lost, and they weren't mass graves. But, we got to get that discussion out there. Arlene W. saying bodies were found, or bodies were not found. Sorry, yeah. But nobody's exhumed either. That's the thing too. I should clarify. I don't want to say there aren't any. I don't know. I don't. So let's get in there and find out what's going on. I'm in no more position to say there are not bodies in the Kamloops school than the people who are saying there are. There's only one way to find out. And you need a forensic investigation to dig down there and see. And if they are down there, then let's follow up. Of course, this is important. Was it a child? Was it a First Nations person? Genetics will find those things out right away. And perhaps there'll be some evidence on how that person passed. But until then, it's all speculation. It's all pure speculation. And again, as I was kind of saying before Dan came on, there's a reason the parasites, and I'll call them that. The term that's been used in the past for it, I know it's an out of date, but it's called the Indian industry. There are a lot of bureaucrats and lawyers and activists, as I said, who make a whole hell of a lot of money out of these things. And if they ended up excavating out there and found out that there really actually wasn't a big grave site and that these things didn't happen, well, they're going to lose a big gravy train. So they got a very strong interest in making sure nobody ever digs, because they're doing well enough. Everybody's just assuming that it was a mass grave. Everybody's assuming there was a genocide with no evidence. And they're paying out as if there was a genocide. So of course, the activists and lawyers sucking in that money off of that do not want this to change. And you know, if they really care, they should want to literally get to the bottom of it. Not trying to be playing a pun, you know, but let's get in there and excavate and find out what happened. And you know, maybe it'll be worse than we imagine. I don't know. Howard Bew saying, what happened to Rumble? Yeah, we just had some technical issues today. Howard, I'm glad you found us on Facebook. We'll be back up there and broadcasting tomorrow, which is a little different this week. It's a Monday, as I said. Jet Gorgon saying $1.95 a liter for gas in BC and New Westminster. Yeah, we're getting, you know, a few people sharing their local gas prices, and boy, they're high. So, you know, let's getting back to what McTeague was talking about. Beyond that, beyond the retailers hooping us, it's also a very expensive commodity right now for a number of reasons. I mean, one, the world price is high, so it is going to reflect at the pump eventually. And so people are also pointing out, look, when the world price was 100 and some a barrel back in, you know, 2007, the retail price wasn't anywhere near that high. That's true. But you also have to remember the Canadian dollar was darn near on par with the American at that time. The formula is a little more complicated than that. This time our dollar isn't worth a fraction, and it's a world price. So that impacts it a heck of a lot more as well. And there's some of the irony with the world price. We're sitting on some of the largest energy reserves on the planet, and we're paying such a high premium for it. But it was interesting to hear from Dan. Like I said, he was sitting in government with the Liberals in the 90s and talking about that difference. How did Chrétien balance the budget? Because he didn't look at it, oil and gas as a bad thing. He looked at it as an asset. He facilitated it. He wanted to see it coming out of there. And thankfully, unlike, say, Pierre Trudeau, he didn't do a grab for the oil, though he got his fair share out of you know, equalization when Alberta gets hooped in a lot of things. He also knew that if lots of people are working in the industry, if lots of companies are working in the industry, the government will get its pound of flesh federally, even if they don't get royalties like the provincial governments do. They'll get income tax. They'll get GST because people are spending money. They'll get, you know, all of the rest of the plethora of taxes on everything else they do, corporate taxes, you name it. So the federal government makes out very, very well when oil and gas is developed and sold. And unfortunately, our current prime minister sees oil and gas as something to shut down. And right now, again, when we're paying so much for our cost of living on every level, and to be shutting in oil and gas right now, it's just so bizarre and stupid and ridiculous. But again, remember, our prime minister is bizarre and stupid and ridiculous. So I guess it kind of reflects that. That comes full circle to my thoughts on independence, because I don't know what else it'll take, because he seems to be as popular in Toronto as Montreal as he ever has been. Maybe the oil, you know, the haircut will put him over the edge. Maybe it was always the hair. We'll find out in the polling in the next few months. That's all it was all this time, was his hair. I don't know. But and Shirley is saying, yeah, there we go. You know, 2013 when oil was over 100, the pump barely went over $1. Yes, Shirley. That's what I was talking earlier about, though. Look at what the Canadian dollar was worth at that time, because that makes a huge difference in it. And I don't think it was $100 a barrel in 2013, 2014, though I could stand to be corrected. The big spike was more 2006, 7. I think we were more into the $80 level at best after that for a while, until recently. You know, things that people shouldn't forget as well, of course, when oil was down to $10 a barrel not too long ago, nobody was crying any tears for the oil companies, you know, laying off, cutting capital spending and contracting. So, I mean, we got to remember there's ups and downs. But it's good to see. It was a good tip out of Dan and some people pointing out UFA apparently is really cutting their prices. The more that do it, again, it'll spread across the line. And yeah, we don't want to see government getting in. We don't want to see them jumping in. We don't want to see them legislating prices. That's the step towards nationalization, guys, and that's dangerous. So it was good, as Dan said, you know, shame these guys. Make sure they know it when they're screwing us like that, so that they can correct it before, you know, people like Notley can get in there and do it the way they would. And let's see here. So let's see some other questions. Ken Smith saying, how does it work when Danielle wins if, I'm going to correct you, Ken, you said when, but if Danielle wins the leadership, because it's far from done. And she isn't a sitting MLA. I believe she still can serve as a premier from up in the. I could be corrected on that, but I'm pretty sure she would still be the premier. She just doesn't have a seat, and she'd manage cabinet, and she would, but she wouldn't have a seat in there. She wouldn't be answering questions directly until she gets a seat. In those situations, well, we're 6 months away from a general election. I don't know if they would try and invoke a by-election fast to get her in there quickly, get somebody to step aside in a safe seat. That's happened a lot of times. It's ugly, the politics that happen. Usually a person gets cut a good deal, a soft landing, a good government appointment or something like that, and say, make room here. We need to get the leader in. That happened way back with Don Getty, if you remember. That was a real embarrassment. He lost his own seat, and he was the premier. So they actually had somebody step aside. I think it was Stetler in a safe seat, and they pumped a whole pile of money and built him a hospital and everything there to make sure, and he won that seat and got back in. But there's ways, and she, so if she was the one who wins, then she would be able to get in and govern somewhat at that point. Speaking of, I guess, free markets and capitalism, let me get to our sponsor today, and that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I haven't talked about firearms yet today. Anyways, Dave did it. I mean, it sounds like there's some insane shootings and crap going on out in BC. Weird times and dangerous times. But the CSSA isn't about those kinds of shootings. What they're about is law-abiding firearm owners. People like you and I. We're target shooters, we're hunters, we're collectors, whatever it might be. We just want good resources, networking with other firearm owners, and of course, standing up for our right and ability to own those firearms. And the way to do that is to have an association, get together, share those resources, and lobby for yourselves. It's hard. One person sending an email to an MLA or an MP can only do so much, but an association with thousands and thousands of members has resources to do court challenges and to organize better pushbacks. And that's what the Canadian Shooting Sports Association is about, what they do. So, guys, if you value your firearms and you aren't a member yet, get on there. Take out a membership. It's not that much, and it's well worth it. And it's good for you as a firearm owner, and it's good for your neighbors in protecting their rights too. CSSA-CILA.org, Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Okay, so let's see. Justin Tremblay saying, I think the purpose of the Pope's visit was to gaslight the public enough so that when the truth does come out, people have made up their minds on who's at fault, regardless of the facts. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the Catholic Church would rather this behind them. I mean, they were cornered. They'd rather not be in this whole thing. I'm sure he would have rather hung out in Europe. So I don't know if they're tied in on it, but I'm certain there's a lot of people, when I'm talking about the language being used and everything, yeah, they do want it hyped up enough. They want to create a deep enough mythology, a deep enough basis on things that it just can't be countered down the road, no matter how many facts come out, because there's a lot of people doing really, really well out of this, and it's unfortunate. Hey, I don't begrudge people doing well. I just don't like it when it's disingenuous. Sylvia asking, why is the debate between Smith, Jean, and Taze when Lowen had a higher percent than Taze? I didn't select who goes in the debate, and I don't know what the percentage is, which poll you're referring to, Sylvia. And again, I'm sorry, it's out of my wheelhouse, but those were the presumed three front runners. Problem is trying to hold these debates. We only have so many resources. When you have 7 people, it just can be tough. I mean, you think of it, if you give a 3-minute opening to 7 candidates, just in the openings and with some gaps in between them, you're looking at half an hour in a debate just in the opening statements. And then, you give them 2 minutes and you're close to another 20 minutes at the end. And, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so Sylvia's saying the Western Standard poll. Oh, you're talking just a digital poll that was held on the website? Well, I mean, that's a poll of our readers, but it's kind of like me with my Twitter polls. I mean, if I did a Twitter poll, I mean, I'd probably find one that's far and ahead, but it doesn't necessarily reflect all the members. So I don't think it was based on just the Western Standard web poll. And I'm pretty sure we didn't commission a full poll. So I'm thinking maybe it was based on Main Street and that. But again, I'm not 100% sure. And Sylvia saying Taze had 4%. Yeah, it must have been a digital poll, Sylvia. And hey, I'm not taking sides, but I'll tell you what, there's no way that Travis Taze is only at 4.4% when it's among members all the way around. I don't know where he's sitting, but that's way, way too low for him. And Todd, well, he's doing a really good job, and I'm not sure where he's sitting. But either way, we based it on a different poll. And it's tough. But, I mean, we just want to have an efficient, good event with the ones that are there and do what we can. And it's hard to make everybody happy all the time, so we don't try. We try to make as many happy as we possibly can and just cover as much as we possibly can. And there will be party official debates where you will get to see all 7 and see how that goes. I believe the first one's in Medicine Hat, and it's not too long from now at all. All right, let's bring in Matthew Horwood. He's our Ottawa Parliamentary Bureau Chief. He was out there dealing with the protests all weekend. How's it going, Matthew?
Pretty good. How about you, Cory?
I'm all right. Like I said, it's been kind of a weird Monday for us, but we're getting through, and so far, so good. We're still on the air.
Yeah. I haven't gotten taken down yet. Always a good sign. But it has been a pretty crazy Monday and a crazy weekend for Ottawa residents. Once again, to the dismay of many, there was another freedom protest going on. It was quite interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, how did that go? I mean, one of the things I was kind of looking for, and it's something, it's sort of trying, I guess, to protest in favor or in support of the Dutch farmers, but it looked like a lot of people were there for a number of causes and things. We didn't see any of the tractors and stuff that we've seen in the Netherlands and things like that, though. We didn't see farm equipment,
Exactly, Cory. There were no farm equipment that came. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't farmers that were protesting across Canada. We saw in Edmonton, there were a lot of tractors and other farm equipment that went on the highways. But Ottawa Police Service, a day before, said that tractors can't go on 417 and 416 highways unless that's the quickest way to get to their farms, which in this case is obviously not true. So we didn't see any farm equipment. We saw about 100 vehicles roll out and do a slow roll on the main Ottawa highway in support of the Dutch farmers. In case the viewers don't know, they have been protesting for about a month now against incoming environmental regulations. The government wants to reduce nitrogen oxide and ammonia emissions by 50% by 2030, which would just decimate the country's agricultural industry. And a day before this protest in Ottawa, it was announced that the Canadian government is going to have a 30% reduction in farming emissions. Reducing nitrogen oxide from fertilizers. So the same deal. It's going to hurt farmers. It's going to reduce the food supply. And so I think it seemed like what they were protesting for was very legitimate. But, you got no tractors. You got the same people that have been protesting for, 5 different events about things other than farming. And then the message gets sort of muddied and you get people with different agendas coming. And the whole thing, if you were an Ottawa resident, it probably wasn't very clear that it was about the farmers' protests in the Netherlands. It was probably, you were just thinking, oh, it's these guys again, these hooligans coming by to wave Canadian flags and honk and cause a ruckus.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to, and I know you're paraphrasing the Ottawa citizens, but I mean, and I wouldn't want to dismiss them all as the hooligans, but there's some truth to that. I mean, we see that in the Alberta protests too. There's some people, they just come out to everyone, and they've got some legitimate concerns, but their prompting is just whatever's kind of got them upset. They'll be out there, and they're mostly upset about the past mandates and things like that. But do you think? I mean, they got some messaging out though, because this is a concern. I mean, it seems to be under the radar. Well, that whole Dutch thing was under the radar, and even the Canadian one. This was just last week, but we're just not seeing a lot of traction on that issue.
Absolutely. We haven't seen a whole lot of talk in the mainstream about this yet, but I think that we're going to start seeing that as the economic issues get worse with inflation and supply chains. And, we're already having huge agricultural issues. Like Canadian farmers have also complained about, 35% tariffs on Russian fertilizer imports, these vaccine mandates for truck drivers that are still making it difficult to transport goods to the U.S., a lot of farming issues for sure. And I think that now the organizers of this convoy, this slow roll, they said that this was a practice run for future protests for farmers. And I do believe that we're going to see much bigger ones happening, because while this movement was, made by or this protest was by Freedom Fighters Canada, and it sort of, as I said, the message got muddied. I think a lot of these farmers are going to be coming back, and they're going to be very upset with the federal government impacting their livelihoods and making it more difficult for them to survive as independent farmers.
Yeah, and I mean, right now the agreement in Ottawa, I guess, is 30%, but it's still aspirational. They haven't come around with a policy on how they're going to reduce it 30%. I mean, we know from this government's record, they rarely come in a nuanced way. I mean, what it's telling you is they've got plans for taxes or bans or quotas or something. But, as you said, it's a practice run, but maybe it'll really happen when it really starts hitting. I mean, when the farmers actually get nailed with a tax, I mean, they're on a tight margin. They can only take their tractor out so far. But if they're really starting to get an economic kick, we're going to see them saying, okay, that's it. We got to get out and do something.
Absolutely, Cory. And the thing is, too, that I don't believe the Ottawa Police Service will be able to keep the tractors out of the downtown. I mean, we saw this weekend, the Ottawa Police blocked off the off-ramps so that the convoy couldn't get downtown. They basically made traffic problems worse for all of Ottawa. And then at 3 o'clock, they lifted that. They let the off ramps be opened up, and then the convoy ended up downtown anyways. So we had about a couple dozen vehicles, join up with the protesters in front of the Dutch embassy and start honking and do a little mini occupation of the city. So if a bunch of tractors want to get downtown and voice their concerns, I don't believe that a bunch of police vehicles are going to be able to stop them. So we'll see whether the federal government keeps that in mind when they're planning this policy around a reduction of emissions, whether they're going to keep in mind that there's going to be, another occupation potentially.
Yeah, well, and that's something that has to be kept in mind too, is right now our farmers are really busy. I mean, it's the peak growing season. Sure, they're not seeding, but harvest is around the corner. They're spraying, they're doing other things. They're always busy. Once the snow flies, though, I mean, a lot of them, unless they're running livestock, can find themselves with more spare time on their hands anyways. And if they're going to get up and protest, I think it would probably be post-harvest. So, I mean, as you said, these warning shots, Ottawa might want to take care here because they might feel a little more inspired come then.
Exactly. Trudeau better hope that the gas prices are too high that the tractors aren't able to maintain themselves for weeks on end and go downtown, because otherwise I'm fairly certain they're going to show up and they're going to make themselves heard.
I wish that wasn't so accurate on your part. So, I mean, going beyond that, what top stories have you been working on lately down there in Ottawa?
Well, as I said, it's been quite a busy day. Today we have Commissioner Brenda Lukey and Public Safety Minister Bill Blair testifying on the firearms case. This whole controversy that happened with the federal government apparently asking for details on the firearms used in the shooting out in Nova Scotia to be used in impending gun legislation. Now, Bill Blair and both Bill Blair and Brenda Lukey are saying that they did not ask about that. They did not, but it seems like they're sort of contradicting each other. And now we're seeing just now that commanding officer Lee Bergerman is contradicting what they said and saying that Blair did pressure Lukey to disclose the caliber, make, and models of these firearms. So clearly somebody's lying. I'll let you, Cory, say who you think that is. But I think the truth is going to come out very soon.
I really hope it does, because I mean the level of this scandal. I mean, again, the things that just are dominating our news and the things that aren't. And even when this first broke, like not enough people realize if indeed this is what's happened. And fair enough, maybe these officers are lying about that pressure and things. But if this was happening, and if this was actually pressure from the Prime Minister's office, this is the sort of thing that takes governments down in normal countries. And here in Canada, it barely made the headlines for 2 days.
Absolutely. You would think it would be the end of Trudeau's government, but we've seen there's been enough scandals that he is scraped by on, and his supporters seem to essentially ignore and not be too bothered by it. So I do think the truth is going to come out, and we'll see if that makes a difference around election time again. But once again, there's been so many of these, I think it just sort of, you tune them out eventually. It's just to be expected, and it's not, something absolutely horrifying that would be killer. But you would think it would be enough, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it would take anymore. Maybe, some candid video of Justin with a goat or something. But I mean,
yeah,
in the meantime, we would hope it would go down to a legislative thing. But as you said, the truth might be coming out soon. Looking farther down, there's going to be the hearings, I guess, starting, and they're going to live stream it in September. I think after the Labor Day weekend, when they start into the inquiry about the Emergencies Act. Have you seen much discussion in preparation of that or anything? Or
I've seen a little bit of discussion. I know it's going to be live streamed for all to see, and they've been talking about who is going to be able to get funding in order to participate in it. But I haven't seen a whole lot of details yet. I mean, again, it's a ways away. We'll have to see what is talked about, but I'm sure it's going to be very, very interesting. And I will, of course, be on the scene to report live from it as I can and give all the details and get the inside scoop if I can.
Yeah, well, it's summer. It's the political doldrums, I know, and but the things are getting lined up. So I'm just checking in on
Absolutely.
these things as well. Tamara Leach is still a citizen of your city for a little while longer. I guess that hearing is going on today, another one, but it doesn't sound like she's getting out anytime soon. Huh?
She's not getting out anytime soon. No, there's a lot of rehashing of the same arguments we've seen, going over, what happened during the Freedom Convoy, what happened during that meeting where she shook hands with one of the other Freedom Convoy organizers, but nothing really juicy has happened thus far. I will be doing a story on it, but she's not getting out today. It's not looking like the needle is being moved in any way.
Yeah.
But also what we've got going on tomorrow is the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. They have a lawsuit against Ontario's vaccine passports that's going to court. So I will be covering that. It should be a very interesting live stream. We'll see what happens, as I always say.
Yeah, yeah. And you'll be watching the JCCF had I believe, a recent victory too with I think it was a firefighter who got a settlement, or somebody or was it a nurse? But the vaccine passport was determined, or at least the firing wasn't justified. Boy, if I can remember which case.
Yeah, I believe it was firefighters, and they got a multi-million-dollar handout because of that.
Yeah, well, it's the pandemic took 2 years, and I think it's going to take 5 years before we sift through all of the consequences and things that happen throughout it. So I guess it gives us lots to cover and watch.
Yeah, almost too much to cover at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let you get back at it. I appreciate you checking in with us today and getting out on the ground to see what was happening at those protests. And we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thanks, Cory. Always a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Matthew. So that was our Matthew Horwood, Parliamentary Bureau Chief. And yes, he does all things Ottawa, out there on the ground looking at things and covering those protests. He was live tweeting a lot of them, by the way. Look him up on Twitter. He was putting out videos and pictures of the things happening and going on down there. The protests just don't seem to stop, but they also seem to be a little subdued. I mean, it's big issues, but they aren't grabbing the general public interest quite that much yet. But we'll see. As I said, I think the winter, we might see things changing dramatically. Costs are going to be going up. Energy costs are going up. Farmers are going to see that looming tax. I got a feeling that we're going to be some very restless people coming in once the snow starts flying this year. So maybe enjoy the calm summer while you can. Now let's look at the comment scroll there. Wildrose saying, can the provinces just refuse Ottawa's dictation? That's kind of some of the questions going on, I guess. That's some of the discussions with the UCP candidates and whether or not the province has the ability to refuse to do things that Ottawa pushes, or the legalities. And, there's some strong opinions and theories on both sides of it. So I'm not sure. That's what a lot of this campaign's riding on. Smith is talking about some very solid, almost trying to invoke a constitutional crisis. Others are saying that won't work, and that a calmer approach should be taken, or a more passive one, but still pushing back. I think at least one thing almost every candidate realizes is that Albertans are sick and tired of Ottawa in general, and realize that it's a big point that we've got to push back against them and protect ourselves from them. So we'll watch that campaign. I mean, I've never seen a leadership debate, I shouldn't say debate, but campaign, where every candidate is that focused on regionalism. I mean, it is a top issue right now. They definitely feel it. They know that this is where tensions are. I think they also know and realize that we're going to have events coming in the future with Ottawa that are going to prompt some battles. So they got to figure out how they're going to deal with it. Just got an update from our newsroom, and this is awful sounding, but this just broke in Langley, BC. So as I mentioned earlier, and Dave said at the start of the show, there were some shootings going on in BC and things. I guess it was 2 homeless people shot to death, and a third was wounded, and the police killed the gunman. So, I mean, of all, the only cold comfort in that update is, that at least the lunatic is dead, but it looks like others got killed and injured. So people don't have to be afraid, but they got to figure out what's going on. And boy, that's I don't get people. I really don't. It's hard. It's hard reading news all the time. I was kind of whining at Jane about that the other day. I mean, that's what I do. I've got to keep up on things. I got to be able to comment on things all the time. I read all the columns. Half of my day, my evenings, I mean, I'm always reading news. I'm reading international news. I'm reading local news. And the exhaustion you start getting, so much negative stuff, so much shootings and so much abuse. People wonder why I'm sour and angry and cranky all the time. Well, I don't see a lot of good stuff. I know there's a lot of good stuff happening out there in the world, guys. I do. But, it's hard not to get brought down when you hear of some asshole going out and shooting homeless people. I mean, they're already obviously down on their luck as far as it goes, and then police had to kill the person. So either way, that's that update, and that at least in Langley, people can kind of relax a little bit if you're from out that way. The live shooting situation is done, and I guess now it's just trying to figure out just what happened and try and prevent it. I don't know how you can prevent those sorts of things, but. All right. Somebody saying, let's see. Bev says Smith is a traitor. Yeah. Okay. I've said before too. I mean, that's the biggest handicap that Danielle is going to have, and I imagine what you're relating to isn't so much the sovereignty thing, but the floor crossing with the Wild Rose, and it's been her biggest handicap. I think she has to convince members that she wouldn't do an impulsive move like that. That she's learned from it. I think she's been candid about it. She's never failed to address it or apologize. But the question is whether or not people believe her. And I don't know. That's what we're going to see in the case of this race. You know, it's one member, one vote. They're going to be out there, and that's where you can render judgment, vote for or against her or any of the other candidates out there. Sylvia saying, when does the House of Commons come back from summer break? That's a good question. I'm going to guess mid-September, but I could be dead wrong. I would just suggest, looking it up online. I'm afraid I don't have it on hand, but they might not be in a hurry to get in as well. Jet Gorgon, play Scrabble. What? Oh yeah. So I see what you're saying. Just for things rather than looking at the news all the time. Yeah, I'm just whining about it. It's my job, whatever. Just once in a while, it just gets a little tiresome. Just when you hear of something so thoughtless, so awful, why would you go out and shoot homeless people? I just don't get it. I guess I should be thankful that I don't get it. Oh, and I see Marilyn Walls there. She's posted a link, by the way. Thank you, Marilyn, for the to our Commons. And there's the sitting calendar, so you can see. I believe that calendar is really good too. It'll show committees and things like that. There's a lot of things that don't just happen in the House of Commons sittings and question period. The committees are where a lot of things happen and people don't notice as well. So yeah, but this race is going to be a big one. I mean, it's running for premier. And that's what kind of surprised me too. I mean, I was kind of surprised that 7 of them made the bar of $175,000 each. Not to undercut their efforts or anything, but that's a lot of money to come up with, and a lot of signatures. It's a high bar, and it was still. I was about to say it. It still kept 7 people coming in. Let's see. Bev says you support her because she worked for the Western Standard. I didn't say I support her, Bev. I just speak my mind on things and everything. And Danielle did some shows for us for a short period of time, but that really doesn't have anything to do with where we're standing on this race. But, if that's what you feel, so be it. But no. Yeah, here's another one, Saniko bringing up. The Wild Rose Independence Party board needs to be removed. That hornet's nest is still going on. I should update. There's stories on the Western Standard about this. So from what I got was they had about 400 people show up for their AGM in Red Deer on Saturday. As I said, there was their board had removed Paul Hinman as their leader, and the members didn't agree. It sounds really bizarre. I'm looking forward to getting more accounts out of it. So basically, the members revolted on the board at the AGM. There were about 400 of them there. It got to a point where they wouldn't allow a change to the agenda. They didn't want to allow Paul to speak. Their interim leader wasn't even there, the one that the board appointed. Paul waited in the lobby until hoping to be invited to come in and speak for himself. He came in after lunch, I believe it was. Now, I could be corrected in some of this. He came in to allow standing ovation and applause. The board called security to have Paul thrown out. That's how badly the board didn't want him in there. And when security showed up, I guess 50 members stood in the front and blocked security and said, no, you're not getting him. And I'm sure the hotel security said, oh, God, we're not getting in the middle of this. And they left. So then the board stamped their feet and stormed out of the room. And that was what they considered the end of the meeting. The hundreds of members who remained said to hell with it and elected a new board, reinstated Paul as the leader. But they're still battling because I guess, the board still has the access to the email. So they've been sending emails saying it's unfortunate. They're ripping themselves to pieces. But what I don't get is why are they so eager? I just smell another agenda going on. This was a coup. If Paul had really done things wrong, and it's possible, I don't know. You had an AGM coming up right away. They had the opportunity literally to be right in front of the members and say, look, we're going to read this out. This is the things the leader did wrong. We want the people in this room right now to vote and say, will we accept this from him or not? But instead, they did the opposite. They kicked him out without consulting the members, and they literally tried to bar him from even going to the AGM with security. Why? And then, I mean, in my view, the members always win in the end. And I'm seeing a couple of dozen people at tops who have this problem with Paul, and I'm seeing hundreds and hundreds of members who don't seem to. But maybe I'm reading it wrong. I don't know. I'm not a party member. But there was just a weird meeting on the weekend, and I think Derek was tweeting about it. This is probably something we might see in the courts. probably be talking to Paul about it soon, get his side for what I can. I tried to have one of their board members on, Northie, that time, back when things were brewing up, but he wouldn't answer any questions very easily. I mean, I tried, and it didn't go well. But either way, I mean, this is one thing that keeps the UCP happy, because, I mean, if the Wildrose Independence Party is too busy all fighting with each other, when we get a general election 6 months away, there's no way they're going to be ready to fight that election come that time. So if you're worried about vote splitting on the right, it's going to be very unlikely. But we'll see what they can resolve. They don't have, time's ticking, and if you can't reach your members, so if you've got this new board, new leader, but they have no email address for the members, they don't have access to the website. I don't know. And the bank accounts, I don't know. It's a mess. It's really a mess. But I tend to, when I see somebody saying we shouldn't let the members choose in an open setting, I tend to, it sets off alarm bells with me. Why can't, if you've got such a solid case to make, why couldn't you make it in front of the members? And then they left rather than address it once the members stood up and said, no, we want to let Paul speak. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. As I said, it makes it all the more important on what's going on. As I said, 7 people came in. And as I spoke with Reed out in BC, now we've got the NDP there. Horgan stepped down. So the winner of that race will instantly be the premier of BC. So you'd think we'd have a pile of people rushing in for that job, right? Just like in Alberta for the UCP. And their bar was something low, like 25,000 or something to run. Not much. They got one candidate so far. That's it. One candidate. It might be an acclamation. I'm trying to find out. I might be speaking with somebody from BC pretty soon on that one to follow up a little more, because it's just kind of strange. You think there'd be quite a rush. Everybody wants to, every politician with ambition at that level wants to be the premier, you would think, right? That's why you're climbing that political scrotum pole to try and get up there to the top seat on it. And here we are with a whole bunch of people in BC, and only one person in the whole province wants to run for the NDP leadership out there. Kind of odd. And Wildrose saying, yeah, what happened to the Wildrose AGM? Yeah, Wildrose, I just offered what I'd heard, and that's going off of tweet accounts from people who'd been there apparently, and things like that. I'm not 100% sure. So I will be talking to Paul soon, and we'll see what else we can try and find out about what's going on there, because it is a registered party in Alberta, and they shouldn't be dismissed. 11% in the by-election. People say, well, that's so small. Well, that's still significant, actually. It's higher than pretty much any other contenders, for the most part. So Sarah saying, is the leadership race closed in BC? Can people still join? I think they still can, Sarah. I think the cutoff when I spoke to Reed was another couple of weeks away or something like that. Let's see. Government. I'll get through some news stories here. Passport office in a briefing note says it knew a year ago there was going to be passport problems. Welcome to the government, right? I mean, the passport's a mess right now. It's backed up, backlogged, as is immigration processing, the whole works. And these things don't shock. Everybody saw it coming. Everybody knew, except government. Only government can be so incompetent. And this is when I keep pulling that full circle. Why people, they want to see things nationalized. They want to see government having more reach and spread. Have a look at what they manage. This is why I don't like a government monopoly in healthcare, and that's what they have. That's why healthcare is failing. It is. It's failing all over. People are dying. It's the government's running it. God, these guys can't tie their shoes. I mean, inflation, and that's when I was talking to Dan McTeague, and I like doing my I told you so's. I was putting tweets out and talking to the Taxpayers Federation a year and a half ago saying, yeah, we're going to see some mass inflation and interest rate hikes because of the path the government's going. Apparently, the government are the only ones who didn't know it, the only ones who didn't see it coming. Oh, wow, we didn't know that would happen. Oh, come on. Every Economics 101 book would have told you that's what's going to happen. But our government can't figure it out. Let's see. Cabinet after 5... here's again, government. After 5 years, says it's no closer to finalizing the refit of a decrepit heritage building that already cost $10 million. So this is the American Embassy, the former American Embassy. I guess it's across the street from Parliament Hill. And they were going to retrofit it to... make it a symbol of Indigenous reconciliation, whatever that might mean. I guess we can't define it because these idiots can't figure out how they're going to define it either. So it's sat empty since 1999. So Cabinet purchased it for $4.5 million. So let's be fair here. This is over the course of multiple governments. Harper was a part of this idiotic mess as well. And they poured another $5 million in since then, I guess, on maintenance and repairs, and they had flooring. And still, they're not sure what the heck it's going to be. In 2017, Trudeau announced it's going to be an indigenous people space. But 5 years later, and these clowns haven't figured out what they're going to do. What they do know is they can spend a lot of money thinking about it. Here's an odd story. A chess-playing robot broke a boy's finger during a match in Russia last week. This is the president of the Moscow Chess Federation. You know, it used to be like Big Blue and all that. That was the big thing, humans versus computers and so on. And the computers eventually just started winning. There's only so much we can do. But now they got robots, I guess, that are physical. And I guess maybe they've gotten artificial intelligence to the point where they can get upset and attack their opponents or something. I don't know. But just an oddball story. The press things. Sergei Lazarev said the incident occurred at the Moscow Chess Open after the boy rushed to the robot. So I don't know, it was a self-defense thing. I mean, these robots are pretty well trained. And a robot broke a child's finger. This is, of course, bad. So Lazarev does realize that this is, of course, bad. I'm glad they figured that out. They say it was rented, and so now they're going to blame whoever they rented it from. But either way, strange stories. Here's another one. You know, police officers, here's one, shot a man's pet snake in Pennsylvania. Some idiot owned a 15-foot long python. It was wrapped around his neck. Police got there just in time, I guess, and let's see, somebody must have called, obviously. He suffered cardiac arrest, but they managed to bring him around. Yeah, it was at least 15 feet in length, and they shot it. I guess they're lucky he's able to shoot this thing when it's wrapped around him too. Why did people own those things? I mean, I don't have a big beef with snakes. You know, when I used to work in the south, run across the rattlers, at least they give you lots of warning. You know, the copperheads would blend in. They could be of concern. Cottonmouth, same thing. They'd open that big ugly mouth and let you know when you're in the area of Louisiana and that, say, hey, stay the hell away. And you stay away. I don't have a beef with them. I'm not one of those who feel you got to shoot them on sight or anything. But at the same time, like Wild Rose is saying, they're not pets. No, they're gross. And especially when they get to that size, holy cow, 15-foot snake. And obviously, you know, the snakes, they're even worse than cats. I mean, we know most cats would kill you and eat you if they were given half a chance. That's most cats. Well, all snakes would kill you and eat you if they were given half a chance. They don't care about you. You can't pet a snake. They don't have affection. They're not companions. It's just keeping a living creature. I mean, I keep honeybees. You know, those aren't exactly companionship either. But I'm under no illusions. I'm there because they're good for the flowers. I enjoy the hobby, and we'll hopefully get some honey out of it. But, you know, if I want to go beating on the top of the nest wearing nothing but a Speedo, I'm probably going to get stung from head to toe, and that will be my own fault. Either way, you know, interesting world, isn't it? Here's something with a release too. Police saying now, yeah, because the Calgary police did a big crackdown on the transit system just before the stampede. Not a real shocker. Look, and it worked out. I remember talking to other staff members the day of the parade when we came down to downtown, because I rode the train rather than couldn't get downtown any other way. And boy, there was security everywhere, and the stations were clean and the trains were nice and everything. But that's because they really cracked down. And now they say they understand that people don't feel safe at train stations. Well, yeah, I know. We've been kind of saying that for a year and a half. But fair enough. I mean, the police are busy enough, and they're, you know, they don't ride trains necessarily. They're going to the police station and digging vehicles. That's the thing I keep screaming to people. You don't know how bad it really is on those trains until you ride them. I think every city councilor should be back and forth on those trains over and over again, including the mayor. Maybe they'll get a better idea. You know, Penner and her bowl. Oh, God. Get out there. Come on. I dare you. Go on. Ride it back and forth a bit. Sit there in that smell of piss and have those junkies running around screaming. And tell me it feels safe for people. The police figured it out anyways. Here's some interesting things. They executed 327 warrants. So there were a whole bunch of people who already had criminal histories that were on the trains. I'm guessing that was probably part of the reason they were able to remove them quickly enough. Because, you know, a ticket might not be enough. But okay, you've got a warrant. Let's pull you into holding. Served 216 summons. Same thing. And recovered 3 stolen bikes. And I know Jane was noting that only 3. I mean, come on. You see those guys riding around. You know damn well most of them didn't buy those things. But they seized 30,000 worth of drugs, crack, fentanyl, methamphetamine, gabapentin, and ketamine. And they didn't lay any charges for simple drug possession. Yeah, there's not much point with the ones who are just possessing. But either way, it worked. It worked. It was a lot of work, but it worked. And they're going to do it again this fall. And we're going to have to do it more and regularly. And I still think the first step is just set it up, even if it's just a booth with a person standing there with a phone scanning tickets, but for crying out loud, just charge people. As soon as they have to pay for a ticket, it's amazing how much better the clientele on transit becomes. But this honor system doesn't work. Come on, the junkies didn't buy a ticket. The guy with the 2 bikes, why does he need 2? Maybe he stole one. Think about that, guys. The guy with 2 bikes didn't buy a ticket. You know, the guy with the shopping cart, the rest of them. Keep them off. You got a good step 1 right off the bat. I know there's bigger problems with the homeless people and the addicts and the rest after that. I'm just talking about one place they don't belong. That's on our transit system. Wilder was saying, did I hear anything about the RCMP busting guns and drugs in Swan Hills? No, I'm not familiar with that one, I'm afraid. There's just a lot happening. I'll have a look for it later. This was something that happened in Calgary. The Peace Bridge, you know, the Finger Trap Bridge in North Calgary, that red and white thing that we spent, that Calatrava Bridge cost $50 million or something like that. It's got all those glass panels in it. Well, somebody went and smashed 80% of the glass panels out of it late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. Those things cost like $12,000 a panel or something to replace in glass. So this is going to cost a fortune. And they say every year they got to replace a couple dozen of these things because people vandalize them. I think some of them gets broken by weather when it expands and contracts too, though they don't like to admit it. I don't know. I mean, I don't like the bridge. I think it was a waste of money. But going out with a hammer and as apparently happened, and smashing it, well, look, the city bought it, so you're stuck with it. There's no sense spending more money smashing it up, guys. It's not a good way to protest. I would suspect once they find out who this man is, they'll dismiss it because they'll say it was a vulnerable person. You know, let's get back to that, right? This accommodating of people, vulnerable people, which is another word for addicts, homeless people. I mean, it's the reality. Why do we sugarcoat things all the time? Vulnerable people. Well, there was the big display again for the anomalies found at the Kamloops residential school site. In the city of Calgary, somebody put a whole big display of teddy bears and shoes and symbols of things from the residential schools out there. I don't know if it's still there. I haven't been to City Hall in a while, but they had it all kind of fenced around. The reason they fenced it was because somebody came twice and lit it on fire. And of course, everybody was screaming, Notley and the mayor, and oh, it's white supremacists. They're definitely doing it. They're vandalizing this. They want to light it on fire and everything. And then it turns out, yeah, it was a vulnerable person. And actually, the rumor is it was a First Nations vulnerable person who was lighting it on fire. So then everything just kind of went quiet, and they just put a fence up around it. Forgot it. The vulnerable people can be dangerous and damaging at times too, guys, just because they're vulnerable. You know, when we change the terminology, speaking of things, this is the opposite thing. This is what I'm talking about when we exaggerate things with language, such as calling the residential school situation a genocide when it wasn't. We sugarcoat other ones rather than tell them what they are, and that doesn't help. When you keep calling them vulnerable people, why? They're addicts. They're addicts and they're people with mental health issues. I'm not saying it to stigmatize them, but let's talk about what it is because it's a better way to find a solution. When you give this Disney sugarcoating crap and say vulnerable people, you're talking around the issue. You're skirting it. As I said, you're doing the opposite of the ones who want to call every person who attended a school a victim or want to call a non-genocide a genocide. So vulnerable people, that's not the right way to do it. And there's a great, from I'm forgetting his name, George Carlin. One of the greatest comedians that ever lived. He most definitely was. He's certainly no card right winger, but he could observe things and cut through them with some fantastic monologues. And one he talked about, one that he went on for a long time, and he went through the whole history of how in World War I, you used to have these men who would end up in mental institutions and disturbed and problems, and they were shell-shocked. So the term then was shell shock, See, he said, the way he described it says it sounds like guns almost, 2 hard words. And then after that, they changed it to battle fatigue and all these different terms that they changed it to all the way through till today. And it's some, post-traumatic stress disorder. This is now a simple term that used to be, 3 syllables, 2 syllables is this big, long term. And he says, maybe if they just stuck to shell shock in the first place and what it was about, the guys that need it today would actually be getting the help because there's a whole lot of veterans who have a hell of a hard time coming back. But when we cover everything in long, flowery terms rather than just saying stuff where it is, we actually dodge the solution on a sticky issue we didn't want to talk about. Language is important, guys. It's very important. Yeah, it seems to be a theme today. But we use language to sugarcoat some things and we use them to exaggerate other things. And all I want is the freaking truth. So, I'm not going to talk about vulnerable people except when I talk about it in the ironic sense like I did now. And I mean, I've had many shows. I'm very sympathetic to people in states of addiction and with mental health issues. But sitting and talking in circles around it isn't going to help them any. Another story. So yeah, it's coming up, and this is something we've had as an ongoing theme too. I asked every provincial candidate about it. They all talk in circles about what they're going to do. But the police have been increasingly been used as ambulances because we don't have any ambulances. They're all sitting around. The attendants are in the hospitals because they can't get the union staff to sign off and take their patients off their hands at the hospitals. So now police are rushing people to hospital because they know that they'll be waiting too long for ambulances. And, you keep hearing, again, the UCP says, oh, we're going to take a 4-month study to figure this out. We've been talking about it for years, you guys. Enough excuses. No wonder you got people pissed off. But you're going to take 4 months. We know the problem. And then someone said, oh, we're going to bring 20 more ambulances online soon. Oh, so what? So that's 20 more sitting around hospital hallways. Address the issue. You know what? You got a problem in the hospital, not on the street with the ambulances. Don't allow me. Bottom line is come in, put a stamp on it, hand the form to the nurse and leave. Let them get out and be ambulance attendants. If the hospital's overloaded, well then fine. Let's get the doctors and nurses at the hospital to tell us how to fix that. But right now, if anything, we're enabling them by letting them use paramedics for hallway care. And now it's trickling down the line that our police officers are working as ambulance attendants. And that's great when you got the armed robber in your place. Yes, the police will be 40 minutes. They're taking somebody to the hospital right now. Let's get our shit together, guys. Come on. Yeah, and Gondek, she's speaking up on the situation of an urgent care center in Airdrie being shut down on weekends and evenings because they don't have any doctors. And again, that gets back to this. The system is broken. The Canadian healthcare system sucks. I'm going to keep going on about that too. And it is. It sucks by every measure. For the value we're getting, dollar for service is crap. And there's many, many better models around the world. Until people realize that, I don't know what it'll take. How many closed centers, how many late hospital arrivals, how many people dying waiting for ambulances, how many people dying in hallways and gurneys. The system's failing. In fact, it's failed. We're shutting things down. But the only solution that's allowed by the NDP is to pour more money into it. And the UCP is to talk about it because they're still too scared, chicken shit, to say, well, let's take on the system. Let's take on the system because everyone, private care. So what? I don't care if it's private or public. I just want my care. And I don't care about the American system. I'll just get that out enough. Somebody's going to say American. I don't care. There's dozens and dozens of European systems better than ours. And they use a lot more private capacity than us. All right. Boy, I was really ranty today. Got that off my chest. Thank you for listening to me today, guys. It's very therapeutic for me. And I'm feeling better now for it. I don't cry. Don't care for it. I rant. I get it out, and I feel really good after a good rant. So tomorrow, another good show. I got Jaime Rubenstein on. He's been on before. He's an anthropologist. He's from Manitoba at the university out there. And yes, we are going to talk about residential schools and the Pope's visit. As well, I'm going to have Mike Thomas on. He'll be in studio. He's come on before. He writes a lot of columns for the Western Standard, and he's always got good stuff, particularly about some of these. Hey, not everybody's having the hard times. There's some houses out there worth some crazy amount of dollars. We'll talk a little bit about that, plus some other stories while we're at it. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. I appreciate it, and I will see you all again tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.